Hello and welcome to StratNews Global. And welcome to The Gist, our signature evening show on foreign affairs and security. I'm Surya Gangadharan, and with me, our guest for this evening is Dr. Manpreet Sethi, a distinguished fellow at the Center for Air Power Studies in Delhi. She's also a well-known scholar on nuclear issues. And our subject today is the China-Pakistan nuclear play. Now, I'd like to take your attention to to this video by Shinhua. It shows the latest nuclear reactor that China has built for Pakistan. It's called Hualong 1. It's in Karachi. It was linked to the Pakistani electricity grid just last month. As I said, it's an 1100 megawatt reactor. It's Pakistan's biggest to date. And there are at least one more that the Chinese are planning to build for Pakistan. A quick background on the nuclear collaboration between these two countries would also be useful. There's a graphic that we'll now play, just telling you how far back the nuclear relationship between these two countries goes. As you're aware, they are iron brothers, and their collaboration is strategic, it is military, it's also economic, given the BRI that you see folding out before you. So let's just get a quick look at their Pak-China nuclear collaboration. This dates back to 1986 when they first signed an agreement on collaboration in the nuclear sphere. Yes. And in 2000, they signed agreement the 300 megawatt Chashma nuclear plant, followed in 2011 by Chashma 2. Both the 300 megawatts, so much smaller than what we're talking of today. Two more reactors are 315 megawatts, not very long ago. And in 2013, there was agreement to build two reactors of 1000 megawatts each. What you're seeing now is this Hualong 1, which is the first of its kind. There'll be one more that's been planned to be built, and for all you know, there could be even more. Now, Pakistan has a need for electricity, so the fact that these two reactors are coming on stream is good for Pakistan. But Dr. Manpreet and I are least concerned about Pakistan's electricity needs. We are looking at the larger issue here, the strategic play that is going on here. Dr. Manpreet, what's so special about Hualong 1?
Thank you for having me, and I think you've explained the relationship very well in your initial comments. Well, I would say this reactor is special for both Pakistan and China. Their overall relationship has entered the 70th year this year, and nuclear cooperation goes back 3 decades, as you mentioned. Now, from Pakistan's perspective, this is the 6th nuclear power plant in the country, but most importantly, it is the largest capacity reactor to be built at slightly more than 1000 megawatts. Now, this then has brought an immediate jump to the nuclear share of the total electricity generation in Pakistan. So it's gone up from 5% to 9%. And all the other 5 plants that were there were together producing only 1400 megawatts. So this jump of 1000 megawatts is particularly special for Pakistan. From China's perspective, this reactor becoming operational is even more important, I think. It is the first fully designed Chinese reactor, the Hualong 1 that we are talking about, which is the first one to be built outside the country. Some of these reactors are being built within China, but this is the first homegrown design to travel abroad, so to say. And since Beijing plans to export this reactor to other countries, the success that it has achieved in Pakistan helps it to showcase itself, its nuclear prowess, its credibility as a nuclear supplier. And therefore, as you can see, the reactor is special to both of them in their own way.
I was just wondering, given the close relationship between China and Russia in years gone by, could these reactors have actually been mentored by the Russians? Because I presume the original nuclear reactors in China are Soviet mentored or Soviet designs.
Well, that's an assumption we normally make given the relationship between Russia and China. But in the nuclear power domain, things are a little different. Now, just because uh, the similar capacity of the Kudankulam reactors in India, which is also about 1,000 megawatts, and the Hualong one is also around that figure, it
Yeah.
doesn't automatically mean that the Chinese reactor has a Russian connect. There are several reactor designs which are operational in the world that have a similar power rating. But of course, China and Russia do have a close nuclear cooperation, and it's not of the days gone by. It still continues and it's going strong. In fact, it was in the late 1990s that they signed the biggest bilateral nuclear cooperation agreement, wherein Russia decided to build 8 nuclear reactors for China. Four of them are the VVER 1000, which is the Kudankulam
Uh-huh.
variety that we have. And four of them are already constructed, and the rest of the four are at various stages of construction. But the Hualong one is claimed to be an independent Chinese design, with China having full intellectual property rights on it. And China's journey towards this design is rather interesting, since it has been engaged in nuclear power only over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Uh, and though its nuclear weapons program goes back to the 1950s, it became
Yeah.
interested in nuclear energy only when the environmental impact of the hundreds of coal-fired plants that it built very quickly to power its economic growth in 1970s and 80s, that environmental concerns began to hit it, and that's where you see it moving towards nuclear power. Now, by way of comparison, China's first nuclear reactor connected to the grid only in 1991.
Hmm.
And in the case of India, we had achieved that feat somewhere in the 1970s. So
Yeah.
once China decided to invest in nuclear energy, it quickly signed agreements with US, France, Russia, Canada, and welcomed all kinds of designs from everywhere. So its philosophy was not to go with one particular design, but to take everything that was available to it, because it wanted to have rapid expansion of its nuclear power program. And over a period of time, the experience which has been gained with these different designs has come in handy in honing on to its own design, which has evolved into the Hualong One. So this has been designed by the China National Nuclear Corporation, one of the biggest nuclear companies in China, and it claims intellectual property, as I said, on this particular design.
So I presume, is there anything unique about this reactor? Because I would presume nuclear technology is more or less, kind of standardized the world over.
So this is the third generation reactor, which means that the safety mechanisms are far more evolved than in some of the earlier generation reactors.
Okay.
But apart from that, there is nothing very special about this reactor. It's just a Chinese designed reactor for the first time out of its own country.
Now let's come to this point, which you've written about, that the sale of these reactors to Pakistan is completely illegal. Could you explain?
Well, China and Pakistan, as you started by saying, concluded the nuclear cooperation agreement in 1986. This is when they decided that China would help and facilitate the nuclear power program of Pakistan. So the plans to build a reactor at Chashma were announced, and this was one reactor, the 300 megawatt that you mentioned, in 1992. And this Chashma reactor is under facility-specific safeguards of the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. In 1992, the Nuclear Suppliers Group, the NSG, which literally controls nuclear supplies to different countries, it made full scope safeguards mandatory for nuclear cooperation. Now,
Mhm.
this virtually ruled out nuclear cooperation with non NPT members like India and Pakistan, since they did not accept full scope safeguards on their program. They had a strategic program as well. So, all they
Yeah.
were accepting were safeguards on some particular facilities that had come with outside help, as we saw in the case of US India and we saw in the case of China and Pakistan. Now, in order to circumvent this requirement of full scope safeguards not allowing you to be party to international nuclear commerce, India, as you know, negotiated a cooperation agreement with the US, which it earned. And I always say this very carefully: it earned it was not rewarded, it earned this
Absolutely.
particular
Absolutely. Yeah.
deal as a result of its responsible nuclear behavior. Now, Pakistan could not make the same case because in 2003, the AQ Khan network that was run with the blessings of the state was exposed. So, to cut a long story short, while India was accommodated into the non-proliferation regime and it legitimately partakes, nuclear commerce, Pakistan cannot because it doesn't allow for full scope safeguards and it's not been exceptionalized by any instrument like the NSG. Yet, despite Pakistan not accepting full scope safeguards, China has gone ahead with building more nuclear reactors in Pakistan than were originally announced. And that's why I say that this is in violation of the NSG guidelines. And therefore, there is a big question mark on the legitimacy of this ongoing cooperation.
I'm surprised because China is a member of the NSG, Nuclear Suppliers Group. And are you saying that the NSG did not object, or people decided, well, they were making money anyway?
Yes, several factors are responsible for why China has been allowed to, go ahead with this cooperation with Pakistan. Well, for one, China joined the NSG in 2004, and it claims that all of these reactors, the cooperation agreement predates 2004.
Yeah.
The NSG guidelines are voluntary commitments, and the body has no enforcement mechanism by which a member can be brought to book. In fact, the NSG works on the basis of consensus. And who knows it better than India because our
Yeah.
membership of the NSG has been blocked because of this consensus rule. But because of this consensus rule, you cannot even cancel the membership of China or show its displeasure in any way. So that's one of the reasons that NSG guidelines are voluntary and nobody can, call out China on this. Secondly, China is a major economic and military giant in today's times. It has shown its blatant disregard for many international norms, UNCLOS, NSG, non-proliferation. But since the country is so important for its trade and its investment, for its market, for its industrial base, for so many countries, including NSG members, none has been able to call it out or has had the desire to call it out for its violation. And thirdly, I would say nuclear industry of many countries, USA, Canada, France, Russia, are all invested in China's nuclear power program, including research and development on new types of reactor designs. So the Chinese nuclear market, as we all know, it's huge. And as a result of that, this huge commercial opportunity, which is visible to an industry which is not growing in its own country, whether it's US, whether it's Canada, no more
Yeah.
nuclear reactors are coming up in their own country. So therefore, when they see something like this, which is a huge market here in China,
Yeah.
nobody has the intention then to call out China for its violation of the guidelines.
So in that sense, it's very convenient the way the energy is structured. It's convenient even to us because it helped us too. I mean, I'm,
Well,
I'm
yes,
also looking at,
it
yeah,
helped us because India made a very strong case for that help. Because you had shown responsibility in your behavior. There was no proliferation that was happening from India. We also had a large market. We were very interested, and everybody was also concerned how we are going to produce our electricity. How are we going to meet the requirement, which was large given our population and our economic growth. And nobody wanted us to add to the greenhouse gas emissions with other sources of electricity. So there were several reasons. I won't say the NSG is conveniently formed, but the NSG made that case for us because we stood on firm ground on getting that concession.
this grandfathering clause, which the Chinese cite. Um in fact, would you say we are the ones who actually began with that, and it's now kind of boomeranged on us?
Uh, well, yes, some of the Russian reactors in India are under the grandfather clause because this agreement was signed in 1988, and India was trying to find a way of getting more reactors when it was not a member of the international, non-proliferation regime. But China joined the NSG in 2004, and it has sought to use the pre-2004 agreement that it had with Pakistan to announce more and more reactors. And every now and then they keep announcing more reactors. So you can't be
Yeah.
grandfathering so many at various points of time. In fact, interestingly, it was in 2010, soon after the NSG exceptionalized India in 2008, that China announced the grandfathering of the first two more reactors at Chashma after the first one that had been built. And then in 2013, It signed up for the two reactors at Karachi, one of which has just become operational, and we hear that one more will come up. So yes, China appears to be using its cooperation with Pakistan, I would say, to sort of also get even with the US. Just as Washington facilitated India's accommodation into the non-proliferation regime, Beijing believes that it can and it must assert its right to do the same for its, what you said, the Iron Brother, even at the cost of flouting NSG guidelines. It's a way of demonstrating its global standing, being at par with the US. I think that's another message that China sends through this cooperation that it has with Pakistan.
So would you say the logical next step would be to put the Hualong one on the BRI market?
Certainly, I think there is no doubt that China is greatly ambitious about its nuclear power exports. If we look at the global picture today, it is in China and it is from China that maximum amount of activity is likely to take place. It has the largest number of reactors under construction, the most that the world has ever seen in one country being constructed at the same time, simultaneously. Its nuclear industry is also thriving and it's keen to build overseas. So if the CNNC, which designed the Hualong one, is certainly very keen to export that, and as part of its economic outreach, with BRI, China has signed cooperation agreements or MOUs with as many as 28 countries. Many of these countries are newcomers to nuclear technology. So we are hearing these, cooperation agreements with Cambodia, Egypt, Kenya, South Sudan, Thailand, Uganda, and once it has established cooperation with them, either through the build, own, or operate model, or by making them capable of running their plants, China knows this relationship would last over a long period of time. Nuclear reactors have a lifetime of 50, 60 years, and it will give them ample foreign policy influence as well.
But are these reactors going to come under any IAEA safeguards, or China is itself developing its own set of rules?
No, China is not setting up its own rules. They will be under IAEA safeguards. But the matter of concern is that these, as I mentioned, are first-time nuclear recipients. They are going to be
Yeah.
setting up nuclear reactors for the first time. And it becomes very important that the supplier, in a case like this, suitably prepares the country through activities such as conduct of environmental impact assessments, independent regulatory mechanisms, safety and security processes, building the trained workforce. All of these are very important activities to make sure that the reactors run safely. When the US, under the Atoms for Peace program, was spreading its nuclear reactors to many countries, and India, Pakistan, Iran were all beneficiaries of that program. It also helped to build the governance structure through the IAEA. So what I am worried about is that China, which has an habitual disdain for global rules of governance, how much will it accept the nuclear governance rules in a hurry to grab the nuclear market or expand its area of influence? It should not happen that China gives short shrift to the procedural, requirements when you have to set up a reactor, because these are time consuming, and China is in a hurry. So that is where I want to put my emphasis on, that China's nuclear exports could be seen to be welcome if they follow the procedures, which are extremely important, because we can't afford a mishap of any kind in the nuclear sector.
I'm just wondering, some of these countries you mentioned, Uganda, Egypt, I mean, how are they paying for these reactors? Is there some financing that China is doing? I presume they are.
Yeah, normally the model for providing nuclear reactors, that it also comes with the financing and the fuel also for the lifetime. So China, which is flush with money, the BRI is all about providing those investments to different countries.
Yeah.
So the reactors are going to be funded by China. And God forbid if the countries are not able to pay back, then we know what has happened. When China has done other things.
Yeah. And these are all uranium reactors.
Yeah, reactors are uranium. They could either be enriched uranium, or they could be the variety that India has, which are natural uranium fueled. Plutonium is a byproduct of the reactors, which are
Yeah.
heavy water reactors like what India has. But China is going ahead with light water reactors, which will be with slightly enriched uranium.
Hmm. And the byproduct, what happens to the byproduct? Is there any indication who keeps that, where it goes?
Uh, Not in the current set of agreements. See, these agreements are not publicly available for you to
Uh,
read as to how will decommissioning happen, what will happen to waste management. All of that is not very clear right now because these are the first baby steps being taken by both China and the recipient country in terms of stepping into the world of nuclear technology.
mhm,
So it's a space worth watching.
mhm. Okay, let's come to India, which is the last of our section. What's the impact on India? What are we looking at?
So I would say, as far as China Park nuclear energy cooperation is concerned, increase of nuclear share in Pakistan does not concern India. If they are building these nuclear reactors to increase their energy generation, well, that's their choice. But the nature of this cooperation, which is in violation of international norms, sets a bad precedent, and that is where that becomes a matter of concern. Also, China claims that our reactors to Pakistan are under IAEA safeguards, and that's well taken. They are under IAEA safeguards. But when the supplies are traveling from China to Pakistan, what more is going in those supplies? That is not under IAEA safeguards. So, under the garb of that cooperation, what more happens is what becomes a matter of concern for India. Because China has often made this very public that they want to balance India and Pakistan. So, what more is being given to Pakistan, we don't know. Secondly, China's hurry to undertake the nuclear exports, as I said earlier, is a matter of concern because discrepancies in the regulatory processes could end up compromising standards on safety and security. And if that was to happen, any adverse incident that takes place in the nuclear sector will have an impact everywhere. The world is barely recovering from the Fukushima accident. We are 10
Yeah.
years from that accident. And if any other laxity was to take place in nuclear governance, it would affect public perception everywhere. And for India, which is investing in its nuclear power program in a big way, um, that is something that we don't want because it's going to have an impact on our own nuclear power program then as well. Lastly, on climate change, I want to say this is a concern which is very high in today's times. And utilization of nuclear energy because it's a carbon neutral source, it's a zero emission source.
Yeah. Yeah.
So therefore, to transition to a carbon free world, nuclear energy has a role to play. And again, if something was to go wrong in this sector, then it'll harm the entire case which is being made for transitioning to another energy source which is far more environmentally sustainable. So these are some of the concerns. I don't say there are direct concerns to India, but indirectly it matters to India that this cooperation is seen in the right perspective at the global level.
We have a question from Viraj Madhav. He's asking, is the labor, raw materials, engineering expertise all from China in these nuclear reactors?
In Pakistan,
Yeah, yeah.
no, no, not so much. In fact, interestingly, Pakistan's nuclear program it can be traced back to the Atoms for Peace program. So
Yeah.
it goes back almost 7 decades. So in terms of the nuclear technology that Pakistan has, it has gained a certain amount of maturity. Its numbers of nuclear reactors are few. The capacity of the reactors is few, but the human resources, the material capability, etc., has been built up. So the Chinese design and a certain amount of components would be coming from China, but the labor, etc., I presume it would be Pakistani. The local content should be of a substantive amount in these Chinese reactors.
And what would you gauge Pakistan's level of nuclear expertise, skills, its technicians, know-how?
I won't rate them badly at all. I think, given that we've also been running our reactors for so long, we've not had
Yeah.
any major incident of any kind in Pakistan. They have been party to IAEA training programs. Members of the Pakistani nuclear industry are in IAEA. So I think they are proficient in the technology.
There's another question from Shitij. He says Pakistan's Kahuta enrichment facility has been working surreptitiously for many years with no international intervention. Your comments?
So, as I said, Pakistan has a strategic program as well. And, Kahuta falls in that line. What we are discussing today is the power program,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that has the Chinese participation to a large extent. Since I mentioned that Pakistan's nuclear technology and proficiency of its technicians is there, it's also coming from the strategic program that they've been running for so long. So they might not have been able to design a reactor like India has managed to do, uh, but uh, but that stream they are managing by themselves. With the initial Chinese help that came for the weapons program.
So, last question. China is exporting reactors, the Russians are exporting reactors, the French are exporting reactors. We don't seem to export anything. Why?
So that's a very interesting question, and I've heard, for a long time from the Department of Atomic Energy that we have the capability to undertake exports. The workhorse of Indian nuclear power program is the 220 megawatt nuclear reactor, of which we
Yeah.
have many, and the expertise and the experience that we have of successfully building, operating these reactors uh, is a lot. Also, the size of this reactor, the 220 megawatt, is something which would be appropriate for several small countries that want to set up their nuclear power
Absolutely. Yeah.
programs.
Yeah.
So therefore, the case for nuclear exports is there. However, India's absence, I think, from this field uh, can be attributed to a couple of things. One is we could be capacity constrained since we are engaged in building many reactors of our own. In fact, it's been stated in Parliament, I think, about 3 years ago, that we are building in the fleet mode a number of reactors today. So 10
Yeah.
reactors are under construction, and one is expected to come online every year. So your material and the human resources are extremely busy in expanding our own power program. Secondly, normally nuclear reactor exports also come with financial help and lifetime fuel availability, as I mentioned earlier. So on both these fronts, we are constrained. We neither have the finances that China has to be able to extend that to other countries or to give them away as long-term loans, and we don't have the fuel availability right now. And thirdly, while China may be ready to export, given that India is not a member of the NSG. India may want to export, but it's not a member of the nuclear suppliers group right now. So this could be a reservation that the recipient country could have, that you are not an NSG member and you're exporting. Now, in order to circumvent these issues, India has taken a very good step that needs to be mentioned, which is by joining hands with Russia for
Yeah.
extending its expertise and services to third countries. I think many of us are aware of what we are doing with Russia and Bangladesh in setting
Yeah.
up the Rupur nuclear plant. So, from construction to installation of safety measures, training of personnel, hand holding in the initial stages, these are all activities that India is engaged in. And if, as the success of this tripartite, venture comes through, I think it would be a good way for India then to ease into the nuclear exports as well. So this is a good, I think, stepping stone for us to get into that business.
And you don't see
And
any
what's your
likelihood of China relaxing its opposition for India's entry into the NSG.
I don't think so. In the current climate, it doesn't look possible. I don't see the US being able to push our case through with China, given the US China
Yeah.
relationship. But I think India can live with it. It's not such a critical issue for us. It
Yeah.
would be good if it happened, but given that we have the exceptionalization, we are able to access the international market for fuel, for reactor technology, for everything else. We don't have to lose sleep over non-membership of the NSG for the time being.
Manpreet Sethi, as always, a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much. And to all our viewers out there with their comments and observations, keep sending them in, keep coming to our website, follow us on Instagram and various other social media, and send us your comments and observations as regularly as you can, and keep following us. Thank you all very much. Manpreet Sethi, thank you again very much. Good night.